too. I've noticed that. Hi, this is Trovarsi, and
this is BBoyTech.
Yes, and this is Perfect Circuit Chat. I know the screen is just so weird. And tonight we have Nick Quas with Korg with us. Super excited to talk to him about the Wavestate. Hey, Nick.
What's up? It's awesome to be on here. This is cutting edge right here. All right.
Nice. And we have Trevor too.
Hi.
What's up, Trevor? Cool, man. It's good to have you, Nick. We were just talking about we haven't seen each other since NAMM, and in a typical year, we would all kind of run into each other at a million different events. Yeah. You know what I mean? But 2020 has a mind of its own already, so you know.
It is weird. I mean, and I feel like a lot of people were kind of sad to see, like, you know, Super Booth and Synthplex and who knows what else either get moved or canceled, or, you know, it's a weird time.
Yeah, and that's just why we, you know, want to jump in and do this kind of stuff with the good synth talk and the drum machines and all music equipment and stuff. And you kind of have one of the more exciting products of the year too, which is
this is the Wavestate. I've got this like kind of dual camera setup going on, but yeah, it is a good time to be somebody who spends a lot of time in your room playing with synths, and I am one of those people. But yeah, this is the Wavestate. It's a wave sequencing synth, and wave sequencing synths kind of like, there's only really a couple synths that do wave sequencing out there. There was the Wave Station in the 90s, and then the Korg Kronos, the top of the line current workstation from Korg, has wave sequencing in it as well. But it's kind of just really a unique way of doing digital synthesis. So like back in the day was revolutionary, and now this takes that like
even
foundation.
So I was reading on it, and I see that, you know, in vintage synth, what they had written on it says sequential circuits finally went belly up, and the research and development into vector synthesis was picked up by Korg, and that gave birth to, you know, the Wavestation synthesizer. It was kind of based on some Prophet VS stuff. So this has a kind of deep lineage, really.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
So like one of the things that this has that is kind of part of that Wavestation all the way back to Prophet VS heritage is this vector joystick right here. And I just have like I'll put it in the middle, and you can kind of hear the like kind of symphonic orchestral sound that I have pulled up. But if I move the joystick to the right, you can hear the layers that are making that up. So the idea with the vector joystick and vector synthesis is you can have this kind of vector joystick that at its most basic is just kind of a volume between 4 different layers, but you can assign that to a whole bunch of different parameters within the Wavestate through what are called vector envelopes.
Nice. That's pretty, and that seems pretty power packed to be in such a small package. I mean, it's small in the sense that obviously it's a desktop synth, but then you have full size keys and all this, you know, sort of vector sort of technology packed in there. That's pretty amazing for such a small package.
Sure. I mean, like this kind of digital platform, it was developed by Korg R&D in California. So we have a research and development department out in California that's worked on just a lot of the different projects over the years. But this is kind of one of the first, at least in a long time, that they really spearheaded. And, you know, I work with them sometimes to put out video content. But like this synth, it is completely different than kind of any other digital synth that's out there. I think it kind of has this like paradigm that you see in Korg instruments going back a long time, that, you know, it at face value, it's got awesome presets, and like you could preset surf on this thing. But if you really want to get into the programming and you want to make it do whatever you want to do, like it is so open and like so open-ended and like so customizable, and like they really thought of everything. Like everything can like modulate anything else, you know, just create a modulation path and grab a knob, create, you know, some sort of thing, and then create that and change the source, you know, and then you have all this power under the hood. So you have wave sequencing, right? And you have vector synthesis, right? So those are kind of like the basis for this instrument. But they're just kind of like the system that this lives in, right? You have the ability to do like crazy stuff beyond just sequencing your waveforms and layering stuff. But those are kind of the ecosystem that it lives in. That makes sense.
No, that makes sense. So, and the thing is that I kind of see with it is, like, it seems like that a lot of folks feature the sort of wave sequencing. And like what strikes me more than anything, and obviously with the stuff you said, but what strikes me more than anything is just the sound, let alone what the wave sequencing can do, but the quality of the sound is pretty like pristine. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so the D to A on here is obviously, you know, like it's 2020. You know, D to A has come a long way since the days of like the late 80s, early 90s, when you had synths where there was aliasing and like steppy filters and stuff like that. Now the aliasing frequency of, you know, the digital realm is like so high that you can't really hear it. And that kind of combined with the fact that like back in the 90s, you had megabytes, and now you have gigabytes of sound sources and samples. So, you know, you have like classic kind of almost corny 90s like wave sequence sounds. Like this one's a classic one, right? Right, that's like the classic wave sequencing sound from the Wave Station. But then you can do like much more in-depth stuff. And one of the things that I love about this is there's just gonna find the scoring possibilities on this synth are right. I have an orchestra here. Right. And what's going on there, it's stochastic. So there's like a lot of randomness in there. So where the Wave Station could do like this super intense wave sequencing where you had a bunch of different samples and you had levels and shapes to the kind of contour of the note envelope, like now you break out of that and you can have these different lanes going where it's just a bunch of different motion sequences. And like, yeah, you can have those modulating the different lanes, right? I'll make this bigger here. You can have those modulating the different lanes, but they're almost like free running modulators that you can just send to anywhere. You know, it's really open in the architecture side.
Can you walk us through like a patch, for example? Just
yeah. What do you want to kind of start with as far as what kind of sound?
Oh, I don't know, Corey.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe some evolving pad of some sort.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. Yeah. So, so one thing I want to kind of show on here that's cool is if I go shift and left, right now I'm sorting, right? So this is a cool thing. My webcam is not, you know, it's not 4K by any means, but I'll give it a little bit of a close up here. In case it's not completely legible, it says filters in sort order. So not filters as in like, you know, the filter, but actually just filtering any list on Wavestate, whether you're browsing wave sequences, whether you're browsing your performances, whatever. So I'll go category and let's go to pad, right? So that's super useful. The first one on here, I don't know if it's legible, but, you know, press enter, 10 pads on the sample knob, right? So if I just play, right? A beautiful pad. But if I zoom out and then I move the sample knob, right? You see how the wave sequence here, I want to point to my own screen, but I got to point to the screen on here, is moving, right? So, but it's not moving by itself. It's just moving when I like that one. That was nice. That's a way of kind of using a bunch of different samples in a wave sequence, right? The wave sequence steps right there as like, okay, I want to quickly kind of have a different selection of pads, right? So you could also turn on like note advance and so something that I suggest people do when they get their hands on Wavestate for the first time is just pull up a sound, mess with the mod knobs, right? Because that's where all of your kind of variation comes from. Because all the voicings that are on here have so much going on in just these 8 knobs. And like, you know, they kind of stick out. It's just like, okay, what can I get out of this? Just changing, you know, if I pick up, say I have all the pads sorted.
Oh, that's kind of dope. And so, what are all the different knobs? I'm actually pulling up a picture here to look at it.
Yeah. So
those 8 knobs that you were just speaking of, what are they?
So those are the mod knobs, right? So you can think of them as kind of like free running modulators that. If I just pick a lane here, and you know, each of these mod knobs is associated with a lane, right? So if I go, you know, there's like when I was in, let's bring up that sound that I had, 10 pads on the sample knob, you know, I have the sample lane selected, right? So in the sample lane, if I click on that, and one of the cool things about Wavestate is if I just click on a button anywhere, it'll take me on the screen to that section in the menus. So there's not a lot of menu diving. It's like a lot of shallow menu diving. You might get like 1 layer in, but you're not going to be like 10 layers deep in a menu and like, oh my God, where am I going?
And that's good to hear because this is a deep synth, but it's nice to know that the menu system is kind of shallow and, you know, at the fingertips. So in with the knobs though, each knob is like one is sample, one is pitch, one is, so every preset may have some, you know, level of those knobs set to, you know, some sort of depth, but you can also use those as modulation lanes, like in modulation lanes when you're playing and stuff, or
exactly. Yeah. Okay. That what's so cool about the synth is like, you can think of the labels on the mod knobs as they're not even hard rules. They're guidelines. Okay. It's like, okay, yeah, this is the sample mod knob, but like this can modulate any other destination on Wavestate, you know? And it doesn't have to like be locked to modulating, you know, the sample lane, right, in your wave sequence. But like for example, for this sound, it's modulating the sample that you're starting with.
So is each knob modulating different parameters, even on like say the one knob? I can't see that. I'm sorry. Just.
Oh yeah, no worries. Let's get a close up here. And
oh, okay, so I see. So pitch. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I think I answered.
Is that better?
Yes, perfect.
So, okay. The idea here is like on a lot of like kind of more in-depth synths, you have like macros, right? Where one knob, like I think there's a lot of digital synths where you want one controller to do like 5 things at once. And that's kind of the idea with the mod knobs, right? So they're associated with a wave sequencing lane, but they are really just kind of free running modulators that, like, for example, on the step sequence lane, right? So let's see. One of the things that you can keep in mind on here for navigation is if I hold enter and then, press a section, it'll take me to that section, right? So go to the step sequence lane and, you have your loop points and stuff like that. And then I page through and then I have all my different steps. I can add, delete steps. And another thing that's cool about this is there's probability, right? So this is a sequence basically of modulation information. And specifically the step sequence lane is kind of able to do, they all kind of have a unique property, right? So let's go to the pitch lane, right? This is cool. Like, and then I go to lane preset and I'll do this on a sound that is kind of more, actually we can, so remember how we sorted, so I'm going to go to category all, perform, and then find maybe, cool. So this is kind of a percussive thing. There's a lot of wave sequencing going on here, right? And we went to our pitch lane and hold enter, go here, and then just choose a lane preset. And I'm using lane presets to immediately modify one of the lanes, just one of the lanes. So let's see. Okay, I'm in this. There's different. So just for reference, I don't want to kind of go too fast here. On Wavestate, you have 4 different layers, and there's basically 4 timbres.
Okay.
And whether that's layered on top of each other, split the key bed, have different velocity zones, it's kind of really up to you. You can have kind of the layers come in, but it is 4-layer multi-timbral. So what I'm doing here is I'm soloing the different layers to hear what they're doing, right? So let's go back to here. Here we go. Right? Go to the lane preset.
Oh, so you're changing the actual timbre that's in that preset right now.
Exactly.
Okay. So then you can go to the next preset and then change that timbre and scroll through. Nice. So you're building your own preset right now by changing each layer's timbre.
Yes. One of the things that we kind of we've encountered on here is like you can start from scratch. If I go to here and just starting from scratch with a gated sine wave, basically, you can do that, but it's almost more fun to just pick a preset and go just scroll to a random preset. Let's see.
So Nick, let me ask you then. So how many presets and how many user presets? That's a question in the chat too.
How many presets? Hold on. Off the top of my head, state user presets. Basically, user slots are essentially unlimited. I mean, you're not really going to run out of space. Wavestate presets. Off the top of my head, I don't know an exact number, but there are a ton of like really, really great yes, a lot of really great voicings. But as far as user slots, it's like this. We're going from the 90s where it's like you have megabytes to store maybe like 0.1 second samples to like, hey, it's 2020. Even like a small synth like this has gigabytes of storage space, and due to that, you're basically never going to run out of storage space for user slots. So what we did on here is we made all of the default preset voicings. Those are write protected, so you can't like overwrite and lose your presets, but you can always basically have room to write more presets. So what I was getting at before is like if I just pull up a sound, I don't have to like get really deep into the wave sequencing. I just go lane preset, and all of the different lanes, they have some of them. let's see. Depends what layer I'm editing. So I can solo that. Right, so Nick, I'm not changing all of the lanes at once. I'm just changing one lane, and there are like 7 different lanes basically going.
Cool.
So Trevor, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question. So I'm just curious. So as far as like what exactly, as the oscillators go, what exactly is wave sequencing? Because it seems like, it's kind of a combination of like wave tables and also samples. And so I think, if you could just kind of give us an idea of what those oscillators can do.
Yeah, 100%. So just as far as so as far as an oscillator in the traditional sense, there's not really wave tables on Wavestate. The idea with the original was you had basically a sample lane, and that was your sound source. It was built on samples. And whether that sample was like, a snippet of a flute or a string or something, or like just a synth wave form, it would just page through as a lookup table, and it would be the same order every time. And, basically every time your wave sequence repeated, it was the same. So on here to kind of demonstrate this and how it kind of breaks out of that, let's just start with an init, right? And then immediately we can hit perform. So we now see all our wave sequencing lanes. And then let's pick the sample lane and go and pick a lane preset. And let's see, get some more pixels here. There we go. It's a little hard to see just based on the kind of stream quality, but you can, it's the preset is currently initialized sample lane, but if I just choose something else, these are preset wave sequences, right? So it's essentially a sequence of different samples that you kind of crossfade or switch to rapidly instead of crossfading. And you have, obviously settings that you can change how it pages through those samples, but that's your sound source, right? So your sound source is essentially a sequence of samples. So it's not a wave wave table. It is kind of, because a wave table is very, very specific. So like it's a kind of a common misconception that the Wavestate is a wave table synth, but it can do some things that are very similar to wavetable synthesis, right? Because you can use this like vector, actually get my full, you can use the vector joystick to fade between layers similarly to how you can fade, to different points in your wavetable on a wavetable synth.
Okay. And it sounds like you also have a lot of like single cycle waveforms and stuff like that. So you can even do like analog synth sounds too.
Yeah, that was one of the things. I'm like, I love just, give me like an analog subtractive synth. Give me like a one oscillator, like one envelope, single filter, analog subtractive synth. And I'll just make music by myself for the rest of my life. Right. Like I would be happy. I'm not, I don't need much. Like this thing is incredible because it's this brilliant wave sequencing synthesizer with gigabytes of huge samples, like awesome wave sequences, huge effect section. And if you just want to do a little like very simple analog subtractive waveform, you can also do that. Like, so I'm going to open up that init again, right? And I go to my wave sequence select, right? I'm in wave sequence mode, right? I'm initializing a sound and I just start out with a single layer that is a wave sequence. And it's just got a 2-step wave sequence. That's the default sound, right? If I change modes to single multi-sample, now we're cooking. Now we can we have all this power under our fingertips, but like maybe we've created a bunch of wave sequences and we want to go back to basics and make a very simple sound on it. And you can absolutely do that. Like I start out with just an acoustic piano sample, but I go to my multi-sample select, right? The multi-sample is just a way of storing sample information where it's not, just one sample stretched over the whole key bed. It's kind of a whole range. Let's go to the wave, scroll to waves, and let's just get a saw wave. And I'll create a straight up subtractive synth sound on here. Let's see. We got some unisons. All right, that's a nice fat buzzy saw, and let's go back to our perform screen. And on here we have 4 envelopes, right? The 3 just kind of regular ADSRs and then the vector envelopes. But let's hit our amp envelope. Right? Filter envelope, and by default this is a poly 6 kind of digital modeled filter. There's also an MS-20, a little bit more like somebody in the chat said sample table synth. I'll take it. I think that
I like it.
that works.
That
So let's hit the filter envelope and bring in a little bit of that intensity. And I think I liked actually the poly 6 better. And then, of course, we got to do some mod effects, right? It's poly 6. So let's see. Let's select poly 6 ensemble, baby. There we go. Enter. And then my wet dry control, my depth. And that's about as poly 6 as you can get on like a hardware synth that came out. You go from 0 to just having like basically a 64 voice digital hardware poly 6 emulation. Throw some delay on that.
That sounds glorious.
Get some reverb on that too. Let's see.
How many effects are in there? What type of reverb delay are there more?
So let's go in. I'll show you kind of the different effect types that you have to choose from. And so we have kind of a couple different, like a tape delay, stereo delay, reverse delay, left, center, right delay, kind of more of like just a typical, and then you have presets out of that. So
Okay.
like you have your type, and then you have a ton of presets.
That's actually pretty interesting for a synth in itself, because a lot of times you have the effects on a synth and it's just the effects on the synth. You don't have presets that you can pull from the actual effects themselves. You know what I mean? Like you'll have the presets of the synth that may have different settings of the effects, but that's interesting to have that where you actually have presets for the synth, but then you also have your presets for the effects that you're using. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so I think it what it really like comes down to is Korg has this just a huge wealth of both, samples, recordings, of instruments that we've used on like workstations, but like just tons of really, really nice DSP that has made it into workstations, plugins. Before we started the stream, we were talking about the legacy plugins, and Wavestate is kind of this platform that just features. It's like a greatest hits of like, okay, let's just throw all of our best multi-samples, all of our best DSP into this synth platform that's got like 2 of the most interesting types of synthesis that Korg ever came out with. like wave sequencing and vector synthesis. Like, you know, it's like a perfect storm. And you know, I know it's a cliche to say you're like only limited by your imagination, but this synth is one of the situations where that really is the case.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can see that actually. I can really see that because it was very convincing sort of virtual analog subtractive synthesis that you just did there, and then you know the effects thing that's pretty deep to have that with the presets. I hate to keep going back to that. And vector synthesis all in there with wave sequencing. That's pretty powerful. Like I said in the beginning, all of that combined in one small compact package is pretty amazing. Now, I mean, how would you say for somebody that's never touched one before, how easy is the programming, or what do you think it would take me from never having touched one of these to get used to actually programming my own sort of presets and sounds?
So I'm not gonna lie to you. It's gonna take some time to the point where you're like programming your own like entire wave sequences.
Yeah.
But the way that the Wavestate kind of has all its sections laid out is like, if you only want to customize one very specific type of like just your sample lane or just your, you know, one aspect of your sound, it's very quick and very easy. That being said, I would say like spend just a couple hours with it. We have a bunch of videos on our YouTube. Like I said, the menu diving is not particularly deep. It's like kind of horizontal menus where like if I go into my perform screen, let's choose a preset here. I'll hit perform and then just page through, right? And I never really go more than one level deep, right? I'm back to the beginning. So I'm not going like page, root, down to here. Oh, wait, no, back here. Oh, no, I should actually be one level over and then down. Like you're not going to get into like that kind of menu diving on here, which is kind of nice. So I would say it probably wouldn't be that hard to pick up and start immediately like programming sounds, because like I showed you guys, like if you don't want to get into like wave sequences, you could just set up just a single multi-sample and start, you know, like use it as almost like kind of that new Dave Smith that's kind of sample based but also has like a subtractive. So that kind of vibe.
Nice.
So with that, then how does the randomization, like just talk about that feature a little bit?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Pretty much randomize. Can you randomize everything?
You can randomize like your entire sound. That being said, like it's not always going to make sense. Like if I just hit random, right? Now I'm in the randomized screen. Let me get my close up going. You can't quite, I mean, like I said, we have a shortage of pixels over here on the overhead camera when we zoom in, but the options here in the randomized screen, scope, and I can randomize my entire performance, just a single layer. I can just randomize my wave sequences. I can, if I wanted to, I could just randomize my filter settings, pitch, like just randomize my effects, something like that. Let's go with just the whole performance, right? And then within the scope that I've selected, right? If I want to randomize my whole performance, then I have the percentage, right? So I have the knob values percentage, modulation intensities, and then I can just turn off if I don't want to randomize the effects, and press the dice again, enter. Let's just see what I came up with. I don't know if this is going to be cool. It could be weird. That's sick. That's like, I mean, I feel like people buy $10,000 worth of modular like Eurorack to make that sound.
No doubt. You know what I think is dope about that type of randomization, where it's not just, you know, randomize entire synth, garbage out every time, right?
Yeah.
there's a lot of times you have that kind of situation going on, but in this case, you could pick what you want to randomize and maybe have a starting point. Well, I want to start this thing. I want to randomize that, and then I want to use that and tweak a little bit. Then I want to go to this section and randomize that, and you can sort of kind of have a controlled randomized patch that you start to build and tweak a little bit. I kind of like that idea of randomizing sections, randomizing specifics, you know, and building from that.
So, that's like a really good point. I mean, like if you're just randomizing everything on a synth, it's probably like 9 times out of 10, it's just going to not make any sense, like sonically, right?
Yeah. Same noise. There's random noise. Right.
So one of the software engineers, Dan Phillips, who actually worked on the original Wavestation, he said, I believe his exact words were, on Wavestate, the idea is you have a lot of little systems that can function independently, and within those systems you can introduce randomness, and those systems can exist independently but also interact. So like one of those stochastic orchestral sounds that I had before, right? Let's see. Okay, this is a great example, right? Right, so we're kind of...
Wow. Right, so we're just kind of randomly stepping through these sequences. If I open this up, you have all these different wave sequences that are running independently, right? They're not synced. I mean, they're synced as far as like, 16th notes, but they're not synced as in, one might loop 5 times for every 7 times another one loops, because they're different amounts of steps. And like you could hold a key down for an hour and not have, any 2 seconds of that hour sound exactly like any other 2 seconds of that hour. That's the kind of randomization that can happen. One thing I wanted to just touch on that because there's so much on this synth, I just kind of blew past it, was if I go into a lane, right? For every single step in every wave sequence, I have probability. So every single step of modulation has a probability with which it'll fire off.
Nice. Nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So you want to introduce randomness. There are a few ways you can introduce some randomness.
It's cool that and I want to ask you about the California team, just because I keep hearing that being called out, and I want to know what the significance is or what the difference is in the teams. But it's cool that it seems like the team that developed this thought of those different ways of bringing randomness into it, and kind of being able to build things based on chance and based on, not necessarily having to be some sort of whiz kid sound designer or super player, that, you can have the synth kind of help you out, but still get something unique.
Yeah. I mean, throughout history, right? Like, what were some of the best, most popular synths of all time? They all had like great presets if you just wanted to scratch the surface, but also had groundbreaking, like for the year, like DX7, those presets, everybody knows those presets. Micro Korg, everybody knows those presets. But also, like, those synths were really deep if you took the time. That being said, you didn't need to, because the presets were so great. So whichever type of kind of synth programmer or just synth like sound lover you are, if you want to go deep, you can. If you don't want to, if you don't have the time, if you just want to get your idea down, go for it.
Nice. Now, about the Korg, the California Korg team, the team in California for Korg, is that like, are they new to the company, or do they just kind of do a different thing, or is this just like their kind of coming out party with this particular synth? Because I honestly have to say, in part of the sort of the talk that's been around this synth, it always comes back to the California Korg team, and that team. What's the deal with that team?
So they've actually been around for quite a bit of time. so Korg R&D goes back to late 80s, early 90s. So this came around the time where Korg had kind of an involvement with the remnants of sequential circuits, and this was like a way different time. It was not quite the early days of digital, right? Digital had been around for a little while, but it was like it was the heyday of digital. We're talking like beginning early 90s, like Oasis, Trinity, Triton, like those synths. Those were the days. So one of the first really huge projects that Korg R&D in California did, and they're kind of just a small group of developers and engineers. They did the Oasis. You guys remember the Oasis?
Of course, yeah.
So that project kind of evolved into the workstations and the Korg lineup that you see today. Like back when it was like just a card you put in your computer, right? Like a PCI card. Then it became, the giant, huge, awesome beast of a keyboard with like a straight up, like, I don't know, 15-inch monitor or however big the monitor was on the Oasis. And then a bunch of different kind of digital projects kind of since then Korg R&D has been involved in. So I was talking about all the DSP that you can find on, a little bit here, a little bit there, a lot of it on Wavestate. Korg R&D, huge role in that.
Okay. Nice. Okay. So it's like a treasure trove of just lineage and good stuff that they've developed over there that you all can pull from. That's dope. And speaking of like Tritons and Oasis, I mean, there was a point when for urban music and stuff, you had MPCs and Tritons.
Yeah.
That's set up.
Those were the days.
Those were the days. It was like no matter what studio I went to, what basement or attic I went to, there was an MPC and a Triton. And shut up, we got everything we need. You know what I mean?
Let me see. I think there are probably some Triton multi-samples on this. Let me just go in an init and then go like we did before, single multi-sample. Let's just look for some Triton stuff. I know I was scrolling through here. I saw some M1, like M1 bass,
Korg M1 stuff,
M1 piano.
That's amazing.
I'm sure if we scrolled through enough, we'd probably find some stuff that was on Triton.
That's cool though that some of that stuff has made its way into this too, though. Wow, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, let me find that. Oh, here we go. There's the M1 bass. I don't know where. I don't know how much Triton is in here, but definitely some M1.
That is.
I don't know. Seinfeld, anyone?
Yeah, no doubt. I'm thinking all kinds of Seinfeld jokes right now. No soup for you.
Yeah. Oh, that's classic.
Nice. How long before you think somebody hacks this and makes it into a module with no keys?
I mean, so like, let's see. It's so it's a little bit bigger than a mini log, with the full size 37 instead of the slim keys. I don't know, because I feel like it's small enough. Like, I have this on my desk. I also have a full, keyboard, full size keyboard with a number pad, 2 monitors. I'm not really hurting for space. Granted, if we have like 10 synths on one desk, then, maybe like a desktop module is a little bit more attractive. I don't really have an issue with the footprint of it. I think the footprint is really nice. It's not a lot of space wasted. Like, it's very space efficient. I would not be surprised if somebody hacks the keys off, because everybody that always happens, right? There's always one.
Yeah, that's always gonna happen.
Yeah, I think I saw one with what was it, Monologue recently. And actually, some of the mods that people do, they look really nice.
I think there's a question in the chat about connectability, like just to the computer. Is that, let me see, I'm going to try to go back and find it in here. I'm not sure if you guys saw that at all.
Yeah, I think they were asking if you could like plug it in with USB and use it, get the sound out of it into your computer.
Yeah, so
like with the DAW, using it with the DAW, that's what it was.
Just
audio over USB.
Just for reference, that is one thing that it does USB data. So if you're librarianing your sounds, and USB MIDI, does not do USB audio, and that's just kind of due to the nature of like the how the D to A conversion is set up in the signal path.
Okay.
I've got a question about the sequencer actually. So I was listening to a lot of the presets and they've got even some like rhythmic stuff and like drums going on in the background, but is it pretty, I'm just curious, like how easy is it to like, if you want to use a preset like that, but you want to put in your own drum pattern or, you know, rhythmic pattern, how easy is it to kind of redo that?
I haven't tried doing that, but maybe we could just try it together right here and see. Let's find one that's got a cool drum pattern. Let's see. All right, here's one that's got a... There we go. All right. So first I want to figure out what layer the... Okay, so I'm going to solo layer A because it's a little hard to see on the stream, but this is the beat, right? Now, remember how we went into lane preset before? Mm-hmm. So I have presets in here. I'm in the sample lane, and I'm going to see what else I have. All right, so I have a couple beats in here. I can then sort, go just drums. So I have a couple different kind of sample sets. Let's find... Oh, here we go. Right. So now let's unsolo by turning the rest of our layers on. So we've found a different kit, and you know the actual drums that are going on, right, are different. You know, kick, snare, hat, but they're just like different ones. Now, if I want to change what's actually going on as far as like the different steps, then I go in and edit the steps, right? So every preset performance on here is made up of, you have performance at the top level, then you have program, so your different layers, each of those are a program, and then within your layers you have different lanes of wave sequencing. So all of the wave sequences from every single program, every single performance are accessible in every single other performance program. So if I'm in one sound, I can grab just one element of any other sound and bring it into this sound. Does that make sense? Like, so I was in that one sound and I took the drum sample lane sequence from another sound. But if I want to get really deep into it, I solo a step, right? So now let's solo that layer. And let's change right now. I've changed just that step. Right now I'm gonna press enter and press another step and play again. Right? That one right there. So I changed just that step and change the sound that appears on that step. So there's a lot of ways that you can customize the drums. But long answer, I mean, that was the long answer. The short answer to your question, though, is yes, you can go in and customize literally every aspect of that wave sequence. Change. I mean, there's tons of, like, if I go back in and just pull up a multi-sample, like, I believe you can actually access just all of the drums. And here.
Is that all the drums in general, or just per kit? Like, are each of the samples are they within that kit only, or are you able to move those samples around and use them in different kits?
So, they're not really organized into like kits, like you would find on a drum machine, right? What you can think of as your kit is a lane preset, right? So if I pull up a preset for the sample lane, that's a bunch of samples that somebody decided, okay, these go together. If I select just one of those steps, I have access to any other sample on Wavestate. It doesn't even need to be a drum sample. It could be like a trombone.
That's even deeper than I thought it was, right? So it's not loops that you're busy sequencing. You're sequencing sounds that are arranged into patterns or lane presets or whatever it might be called. But then you can even go deeper into, for people that may be familiar with other stuff like Electron, it's almost like you just did a P-lock. Like you went in and changed a sound on a step, and that you have access to all these different sounds. Because I guess when I'm listening to the idea of the synth, it almost sounds like, oh, so there's some sort of dynamic loops that they have in there that you can change around and stuff. But it's deeper than that. There's a lot of patterns that are pulled from this pool of samples that you can then go in and edit those even further down. You could totally make this your own thing.
Oh, 100%. The reason that I go lane preset first a lot of the time is like it's so customizable that like you could be here for like an hour just creating, a couple wave sequences and, creating like a complete soundscape from scratch. Grabbing one lane preset and then going from there is an easy way to just change something up based on some data that already exists, but yeah, there's no real like preset loops. It's just preset sequences of data.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's deep. That's pretty.
I mean, like it took me long enough to wrap my head around it.
I'm trying to say it's pretty powerful. You got a lot that you could do in this compact format here.
Oh yeah. Let's see. What have we not talked about so far? I mean, we've talked about like performances, getting into wave sequences. Let's go in and let's just kind of create a wave sequence. So I have a video about this on the Korg channel. If you just look on the Korg channel, it's one of the most recent videos. It's just entitled Creating Wave Sequences from Scratch on Wavestate. We go into perform, and I don't want to use a lane preset, right? So let's do sample lane, right? So just for reference, this is an init. Right? And then if I go and hold enter, go into my sample lane, right? And page to the third page, I have the option to put more steps in, right? Just by default, just for like a kind of simple default sound, they just gave us an initialized sound that consists of kind of a sine or triangle into a buzzy, kind of more of a buzzy saw that's kind of fading with a crossfade, right? So now we want to change what action we're doing to, let's say, insert steps and scope this lane and add steps to end. There, that's what we want to do. Sorry. So we have 2 steps to begin with, so let's add 14 steps, right? Enter, right? So now we have, instead of just these 1-2 steps, now we have a whole 16-step wave sequence. So now, and this is a way that they kind of made editing really fast on here. If I just go to a step, I have the same parameter pulled up, right? I don't have to go step and then choose a parameter. So I can go step, okay, change the waveform, right? And if I hold enter, solo that step, okay, soprano sax, weird. Weird but cool, right? So then let's unsolo, right? And this one's a sine, this is a saw, soprano sax. Let's keep just pulling up random. Right, I'm just pulling up random. I'm scrolling to a random place. Now, if I play this sequence. Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry. This is an important part of the wave sequences, too. I have my loop point, right? Loop start and loop end. And I want to change my loop end to be at the end of the 16 steps. So you can kind of hear, I just chose 16 steps at a random. A lot of them ended up being saw waves because I didn't scroll far enough. But that's how you just create a 16-step wave sequence in the sample lane just randomly. It's very, very fast. Once you kind of get the hang of navigating and once you wrap your head around the idea of like, okay, this is how a wave sequence works. It's kind of like an independent system where the sample lane is different from the pitch lane, different from the shape lane, right? So one of the things that you can get into, if I hit the shape lane, right? This is the shape of each step in the wave sequence, right? And let's see, there's only 2 steps in here. So let's change that to, and let's change this one to, right? So basically we have the ability to like change how the steps fade in between each other. Right? So we don't have to always just have like a slow crossfade between all of the steps. We could have like a percussive sound, right? Like some of the like that. This is a great example of randomization. We talked about the randomize button over here, and then we have probability for each step. If I go in here and let's see, page back. And if we look over here, we're in the sample lane, right? So we know where we are. And then this light is lit up. I don't know if everybody in the audience can read, but this is random order. So I have the sample lane selected. And if I change that, if I turn that off, random order. So now we're linear. We're just going, right? Okay. Right. So, and we also have the loop mode, right? So we could change that to be back to the start or backwards. Right. So if I turn random order back on, oops. Now, instead of just having a series of available steps that is playing either forward and back, backward, I just straight up have like the loop start and loop endpoints just become like the boundaries, right? Watch here, the boundaries of the set of steps that I'm randomly choosing from, right? So, I mean, like, that's kind of like getting way into like the stochastic mathematic kind of ideas that you can achieve on Wavestate. Mm-hmm. That being said, you know, it's kind of like modular, right? You have a huge Eurorack system. You have all this stuff you can do, but in the course of actually making like a song, you're probably not thinking about all of the mathematical theorems that you like would result, you know, but you do have that ability to randomize. And if I, right, I can make the randomization.
That's fresh.
Right. Much more randomized or kind of more pointed.
Nice. And the filters, someone was asking about the filters and we mentioned it earlier, but you mentioned 2 of the filters earlier, which is really dope that they included Poly 6 filter and MS-20 filter. But then there's what, high pass and more. Like the more indicative of like we'll probably be updating, maybe some things coming, or the fact that it just looks like there's a lot more filters than what's listed on the panel.
Well, I can't talk about updates, that kind of stuff. But
certainly, that's cool.
But I will. Yeah, let's just go in and try some of these different filters. I'll get you like a very typical saw wave, so we can like really hear this kind of subtractively. Single multi-sample, and then go to waves, and let's get let's see. Basic simple saw, right? And then just sweep it down with the Poly 6 on. With some resonance. I'm just going to throw on some reverb just so we're not... Give it a little bit of amp release. I love that. It's like, this is... I mean, to my ears, and like I've been that kind of snob where it's just like, oh, this analog emulation, software emulation doesn't do the trick for me. To my ears, that sounds very, very Poly 6 like, because it's the same filter DSP that's on the Poly 6 engine, on the Korg Kronos and in the Poly 6 legacy plugin. So they've had a long time to kind of perfect that model. So, but let's go into the filter. Let's hit type, and that brings us to the filter screen on here. And now I can go to type and just scroll, and here's my list, right? So I have Poly 6, which is just a low pass filter. I have both the low pass and the high pass from the MS-20. I have kind of a generic Wavestate native 2-pole low pass, 2-pole high pass, 2-pole band pass, 2-pole band reject. So let's just kind of... That's the high pass, MS-20 high pass.
It's pretty dead on.
Yeah.
This is the native filter. To my ears, it almost sounds a little Oberheimy. Native 2-pole high pass. Let's go. Native 2-pole band reject filter. Band pass. Now let's go into the 4 poles. This is cool. That's nice. That's...
Yeah.
And then the multi-filter. Right, so just kind of in my mind, what I'm hearing here, with digital emulations of analog filters, you're going to hear that aliasing frequency a lot, especially in like older digital emulations of analog filters. That's really close to my ears.
Mm-hmm.
Like the DSP, I gotta say, it sounds fantastic to me.
Yeah, it really does. It's high quality. I can tell you that right off the bat. It's very, very much a high quality sort of DSP, and those filters sound phenomenal, man. And the MS-20 filters sound good and a lot less noisy than what you would get on an analog one.
Well, I mean, you could just use a wave sequence and use another layer and introduce a very, very low frequency white noise oscillator, and then you have the real sound of the MS-20.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's pretty good. You get a lot of flexibility there.
Yeah, I mean, like in an hour, we've only really scratched the surface of what this thing can do. But any closing questions from the chat? I saw somebody in the chat say "tingly." Like that's when I'm like, okay, I'm trying an analog synth in the shop for the first time. Maybe it's like vintage synth or something, it's like, oh, I just want to hear that filter. And that's what I reach for. It's like if the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, I get that tingly feeling. That's
it.
Yep.
that's
We've
what we're all looking for.
That's right. We've achieved it right there, right?
So I kind of get that out of these filter emulations. That makes me real happy about the Wavestate.
Yeah, no doubt.
We did have a question about whether or not it supports MPE input.
I'll have to look into that. If somebody wants to look into MPE, we're always like looking at new possibilities. Hit up Korg product support and just if you have any specific questions about MPE, stuff like that, just write in and we'll start like a dialogue about the possibilities there.
I feel like I hear more nowadays in recent time, not even, speaking recent, like in the last year, I'm saying recent in the last few months, more about people wanting MPE now than I feel like at some point it's going to kind of be one of those things that is almost a standard. Like it may be a little ways off, but it just seems like that's the really popular, almost buzzword term request. You know what I mean? Nowadays, because the expressivity of everything, all these controllers and different stuff.
I know they just standardized some stuff. The MIDI Association was MPE like. Have they settled on like an official across the board standard for that now?
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I'm going to look into it now.
MIDI Association. It's like the Council of MIDI Elders has convened.
I know.
Now MIDI has evolved.
Yeah, we unite the MIDI. We made it official.
Actually, so you guys know the NTS1 here. I think somebody mentioned in the chat. Just for reference, the the sound engine on here is very different from the sound engine on like the NTS1, the multi-engine on the Prologue XD effects engine. So there's not really a lot of cross-pollination between those. But that speaking of the MIDI standard, so this is, let's see, I have another NTS1 over here. So we actually standardized the MIDI input. You can see right there, right around the same time that the MIDI Association was like, okay, so there's two different polarities on these 1/8 inch TRS MIDIs, and eventually they decided, okay, so the polarity that Korg has been using, that's the one that we're going to go with. So thankfully we got standardized.
Yeah. So it says MIDI polyphonic expression MPE specification adopted by the MIDI Association. So yeah, looks like it's a standard now.
Well, and in that case, I cannot imagine a world in which you don't see widespread adoption over the course of the next few years on, new synthesizers. Definitely
very cool.
Did we have any other questions in the chat? Just want to kind of call that out, give people a moment. I have somebody.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say while we're waiting to see if anybody had any other questions, somebody did ask if you would play a little Star Wars, I believe it was.
Yeah. I got this. All right.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's hear.
Okay, here's an example of why I love the vector joystick on this thing. So I have this huge, like, just beastly brass sound, right? Just want to make sure I'm not too loud here. And then I fade to the right, and forget that's one of the various Star Wars music cues, right? Is that the romance thing from like episode 2, or I think that one in the soundtrack. I don't remember. It's been
I'm
so
not
long
sure.
since I.
All I know is it sounded good, and it sounded like huge brass. It sounded pretty damn good. So
Yes,
great job.
So that's the huge brass sound from before, right?
Yeah.
Just faded using the vector joystick to only have the strings that are in the background of the brass and some pad. So that's with the vector joystick, just layering it up. I saw a question from somebody named Neil. Who is the Wavestate for versus the Minilog XD? And this is a great question, because like the Minilog XD also, I mean, if I had to like choose my favorite synth between the XD and the Wavestate, it would be really, really tough, to be honest, because I love them both very, very much.
Yeah.
I would say, as far as like, it really does depend on what you're doing. Like the XD is for, hey, you are looking for an analog synth that does it all, does everything an analog synth can do, plus a little bit of digital, right? So you have the digital multi-engine. It's open source. You can do some really cool stuff with it. You have a huge stereo effect section. The Wavestate also has a huge stereo effect section. So if effects are what you're really looking for, you're going to find those on both synths. But the actual sound engine, so vastly different between the XD and the Wavestate, right? So your XD is like, you know and love analog synths. You like programming analog synths, and you want to stick with that. If you want something that's like, I can change the architecture of my own synth and how my sound is being made, that's when you go with the Wavestate. If you're like, I guess if there's kind of two reasons to go with the Wavestate. Say you just really, really love the idea of having these huge libraries of multi-samples that you can do kind of sound cues and sound effects and film scores and stuff. And also, if you just want one of the deepest, most customizable digital synths out there right now today.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Very cool.
Well, thank you, Nick. I love the walkthrough. Seriously, it was very in-depth. I think you answered all the questions that everyone had out there. And just like you said, it just seems like you're really just in just even this hour, like you just have time to scratch the surface before you can really get in there. It seems like a pretty deep synth.
Yeah,
I know. I got to figure out how to stream for more than if I could do like a 24-hour stream somehow, like then maybe we could begin to get into like the intermediate like we're not just scratching the surface anymore.
Nice. And someone even just called out, hey, would you ever do a step-by-step tutorial video on how to make your own drums or rhythms, or like you did a little bit earlier?
That's a great request. I do tutorial videos on the Korg YouTube all the time. That's a fantastic request. So I'm actually going to straight up make a note of that one for possibly doing it.
Nice.
Timothy Scott, you made the list.
Yes.
Timothy, thank you for the suggestion. I am going to write this one down.
I just put a link to your first video in the series of Wavestate tutorial videos. So if anyone is curious to watch more, I put the link in the chat.
Those videos, better than I ever could on a live stream, because I could do multiple takes. Anybody who does YouTube stuff, you know what I mean? But that series of videos, if you want to go a little deeper than we did in this hour, check that series out for all the viewers out there who are wondering, like, thinking, I think I want to pull the trigger on a Wavestate, but I want to know a little bit more about how to program it first. The series that Trevor just linked in the chat, that is the move.
Nice.
So are you ready to play a little bit for us, just so we can hear a little bit more of what the synth can do?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Just want to say thank you to you, especially, for giving us this walkthrough. And thank you to everyone for tuning in and their great questions. And Trevor?
Yeah, thanks. Which one? Sorry, my headphone battery is dying on my Bluetooth
Oh,
headphones right now. Okay, cool.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This has
Good
been
seeing
awesome.
you, Nick Acid.
Yeah, we got to do this again.
All right, man.
All right.
Thank you.